So we have looked at the bosses tested on the PTR one by one, and how they looked like, the fight, the mechanics, etc, etc. However, now it's also time to look at the actual spec results so far in the PTR. How the specs have been performing given their planned tuning, their planned changes, if they have any, and then of course the current power level and how things are playing out with their shiny new tier set, which is available for testing in the PTR. So we have yet another season where Champs or Robbie Dobby gives us this collection of all of the results on Warcraft logs of the PTR testing and put them in a nice, easy, readable list. And here we have how things have been going for healers. Now there is a disclaimer to make when looking at the healers, unlike the DPS. The DPS results are a bit more relevant because of course it doesn't matter if you're testing the bosses in a 10-man raid or a 20-man raid or even a 30-man raid. Your single target is not changing if you're playing with 10 other DPS or 20 other DPS, you're doing the same. For healers, though, it changes by quite a bit if you are 2 healing a 12-man raid or 6 healing a 20-man raid. For example, the first boss tested for River Araz, you can see the top 2 healers, these two being a Holy Priest and a Mistweaver Monk, gapping the average top results by like 40%. Well, then you try to look at what they did, what was so special for them to gap everyone, and what was so special is that they very simply 2-healed a small raid. Both of them, 1 and 2. These are the 2 top results. That's because they 2-heal the fight and they have more healing. Meanwhile, if you scroll down and you see a guy hovering around the 2 million something HPS in this fight, and they went on to 4-heal with like 20 players. So of course their overall results will be lower than the ones who 2-heal the fight. This obviously is going to happen for healers and it won't really happen for DPS. But even with these less relevant results, you can still draw some conclusions of the results of the healers in the PTR. If you're purely talking about the results, if you're purely interested about the numbers, then you have Mr. Monk over here being the first overall in HPS on Forge River Araz, which is the 4th boss of the raid and the first boss tested. Soul Hunters, the 5th boss of the raid, Mistweaver is 2nd. Fractilius, the 6th boss of the raid, Mistweaver is 2nd. And then Nexus King Saladar, which is the 7th boss, Mistweaver is 2nd. Of the other healers, you have Holy Priest being 2nd on the first boss tested, and then 4th, and then 3rd, and then 3rd. The last one doing the best was Preservation, who is 3rd into 1st, into 4th, into 1st. Overall, these 3 specs in order, Mistweaver, Preservation, Holy Priest, were the 3 specs performing the best across the 4 different bosses tested in the PTR. So across these specs, the one that hasn't changed much really is Mistweaver. The tier set of Mistweaver is quite good for what it wants to do. You get more CDR of your important abilities, not just when you use Shaylun's Gift, which is already what was triggering Heart of the Jade Serpent. Now Heart of the Jade Serpent always triggers whenever you use Thunder Focus Tea, which is very good because it gives you 6 seconds of CDR. 8 seconds of your CDR ticking 75% faster literally just means all of these cooldowns right here, Renewing Mist, Rising Suncake, Life Cocoon, and Thunder Focus Tea itself will tick down by 6 extra seconds. This already means that this is now a 24-second cooldown at all times if you play with your tier set inside of Conduit of the Celestial Zero talent. And the other good part, of course, is the 4-piece giving you 15% haste whenever you trigger this. This becomes doubly good in your cooldown, because in your cooldown you're also using Secret Infusion. Right before you're using Yulon and preparing for a big healing window, you do Thunder Focus Tea, Renewing Mist. Because you Thunder Focus Tea'd the Renewing Mist, Secret Infusion gives you 15% haste. And now your tier set also gives you 15% haste. So you're gaining 30% haste, practically a bloodlust, whenever you enter your big cooldown, which is very good. Doesn't actually change what you want to do as a Yulon Mistweaver Monk. You're still doing your same stuff, but the tier set is very complementary with what you want to do, which is very good. The other one towards the top was Holy Priest. Now, Holy Priest has an even stronger 2-piece set bonus compared to Monk, which is the casting Prayer of Mending also heals your target. Just this thing alone was giving you over 6% more healing in a fight. This is a very large number, 1400% spell power extra when you cast Prayer of Mending. The 4-piece is very strong. We mentioned how this is even stronger for Discipline, but Holy Priest can make good use of this as well. Casting Piety or Solace gives you 2 stacks of Insight. 2 stacks of Insight means you get to reset the cooldown of Prayer of Mending. So you get to cast triple Prayer of Mending back to back to back every time you use Piety or Solace, which is just good extra healing. So overall, again, just like Mistweaver, it's not that Holy is changing that much in what you want to do. Even the hero talent played in the PTR is basically the same right side with the extra renew build with apotheosis, etc., is still not changing. You're still also, of course, playing Oracle, and the tier set is also giving you just a bunch more healing off of your Prayer of Mending. So still quite good, just like the Mistweaver Monk results. However, a bit of a disclaimer, of course, we always have to remind everyone that when it comes to the PTR, specs that are more reactive and do not have a lot of prep time required get to do better. Obviously, because you don't know much about the bosses you're testing, you have no idea about your timings, you don't have a note, you don't have an idea of how to split your big cooldowns. Maybe you're also lagging, you're from EU, you have 200 latency, maybe you don't have, or definitely you don't have a working DBM or good weak auras for the fight. So it's much easier to play a reactive spec like Holy Priest than it is to play a spec like Discipline. For example, we see here on the first boss tested, Discipline was last, and then this one, Discipline is second to last, and then last, and then last. This is expected. Now, to be fair, this is also when you ask, okay, but then why is Holy Paladin, which is just as reactive as Holy Priest, just as bad as Discipline? And why is Mistweaver, which is more proactive than Holy Priest? You have to set up your Renewing Mist and your Enveloping Mist ramp windows before big cooldown events, then why is it still doing well? Okay, fine, we're not saying that all of the reactive specs will do much better than the other specs. We just said it's easier, you have an easier time playing these specs on the PTR. Then of course the spec itself also has to be good. Talking about being good, the other spec being good was Preservation Evoker. Preservation Evoker is also playing what you are playing right now in live, which is Flame Shaper Evoker playing around Engulf. Not much has been changing around this. Now your tier set has the chance to change a few things. You have a big extra power in your Flame Shaper window, which is kind of what you want when you're playing Flame Shaper. Using your double engulf burst healing window gives you 80% more heal over time to your Dream Breath most of the time, and then guarantees your Essence Burst proccing for 100% basically chance over 10 seconds. Now you can make use of this way more if you actually lean into it, you know, consuming Essence Burst, doing Inner Flame, fires an Essence Bomb at your target, healing players in a splash AoE heal. You can see here Essence Bomb was only doing 3% of your healing, which is not very good. If you consider this is a 4-piece set bonus, like the entire 4-piece set bonus is this. And then you have like a Holy Priest with a 2-piece doing 6.5%, which is twice as much as the 4-piece as Evoker, right? Well, you have to actively play into this. For example, if you look at this Evoker, when he goes into his double engulf window right here, after this second engulf, he will have the 100% chance to proc Essence Burst, and every time he consumes it, you do the splash AoE healing. So what you wanted to do here, if you wanted to fully take advantage of your 4-piece, would have been Living Flame, Echo, Living Flame, Echo, Living Flame, Echo, Living Flame, Echo. If you don't know, of course, Living Flame is what procs Essence Burst, which means now if you want to make use of your 4-piece exploding for healing in a bubble every time you consume Essence Burst, then you want to just use Living Flame and then consume the Essence Burst you just gained with Echo, and then another Living Flame, consume it again with Echo, another Living Flame, consume it again with Echo, which is not really something this Evoker is bothering to do every time he double engulfs. He's not really doing anything. So the value in this case is not being abused in terms of power of this tier set. You are, however, still gaining a lot of value from the 80% increase healing on your Dream Breath as well, for example, when you're playing Engulf. Also, back to the point about being reactive, Preservation Evoker is quite simple to play when you don't know the encounter. You see big damage on the raid, you Verdant Embrace yourself, you use Dream Breath, and you double Engulf yourself. That's it. That's a big chunk of healing, very quick and very simple to pull off, even without setting up entire windows of like spreading your echoes with Verdant Embrace and Emerald Communion, etc., etc. So it's easier to pull off. Now, after these top 3 of healers, the one right below them was Resto Shaman overall. So Resto Shaman has been, the other interesting thing about these results is that the most played spec, definitely by far, in testing was Farseer over Totemic. Most of them were playing with the Farseer version. Now, as for the tier set, we said it was a pretty good stable buff you gain when you play Farseer. Ancestral Swiftness gives you a 15-second long Ancestor that does 10% increase healing, and then more importantly, proccing Ancestral Swiftness gives you 25% faster cast time, 25% mana cost of your spells, as well as faster Riptide CDR, 50% faster cooldown of your Riptide. This is very good, especially because of the dreaded mana problems of a Resto Shaman. So considering Ancestral Swiftness for Resto Shaman as a 30-second cooldown, having 8 seconds every 30 of reduced mana cost of your spells by 25% is a very good way to try to solve your mana problems, and also the fact that you get to cast a lot of discounted spells. So between the two, though, the results were very similar. The Totemic version of Resto Shaman with the free chain heals casted from your tier set, and the more mana discounting Farseer hero talent with a lot more power on your ancestors. It's also good talking about mana. Totemic is still very good when it comes to mana discount. You have the 2-piece, which gives you a free Damper with 200% effectiveness when you consume all of the healing buffs of your totem when you put it down. And more importantly, after casting Damper, your next chain heal, don't read these don't matter, you always proc this with chain heal, casts again at 150% effectiveness. So because the 2-piece gives you a free cast of Damper and you yourself can cast Damper, this means you get 2 free casts of Chain Heal every 20 to 30 seconds. Because obviously Resto Shaman can cast Damper every 24 seconds because your totem in Totemic has a 24-second cooldown. So you get to consume all of the buffs of this totem, plus then use Damper yourself, which is 2 free Chain Heal casts, which is very good for your mana as a Resto Shaman. Besides that, though, the spec itself doesn't change much with either tier set, both Farseer and Totemic when it comes to healing. The 3 worst resulting ones were Holy Paladin, Discipline Priest, and Restoration Druid. Restoration Druid was the one that had a few decent results here and there, some time, compared to Holy Paladin and Discipline, who were basically constantly the only 2 ones in the bottom 2 at all times. So when it comes to Resto Druid hasn't also been doing too well in this season or last season either. They've been just a consistent kind of healer overall. Now most of this continues to be around your Keeper of the Grove hero talent, which is what you have been playing in the raid since the beginning of this expansion, because, you know, Wild Stalker has been very hard to try to make viable as a Resto Druid. At best, most of the time, you're using this in Mythic class for more damage and more hot healing, but that's about it. What you use most of the time is Keeper of the Grove. Now, your Dryad is working just fine, and even the power level of your Dryad fading, making your next 2 Swiftment heal for a massive amount and splash healing, has been proving to be okay. You can see the Dryad herself doing decent healing, right? But we have to be fair also, Resto Druid is closer to being discipline level when we were talking about ramping your rejues across the raid, so you can then use your Swiftmend, your Wild Growth, use your Convoke and your Flourish in this big window. You know, it requires knowledge of the fight. It's much more proactive of a spec compared to something like Resto Shaman, for example, or Holy Priest, right? So even if the results are lower, you can see how this would work in the raid with this Dryad style of play, because this still functions within your Convoke, which is what you're playing in the raid. Summoning the Dryad for 5 seconds to cast an Alph value Trunk, and then on top of that, after the Dryad fades, you have the Swiftman's Empowered. It does follow what you want to do, which is this in the raid. Just follow your Flourish, Convoke windows, and the Dryad herself giving you a lot of Trunk value every time you use it. So it does seem like it could be pretty solid in the raid with these 1 minute timers around Convoke and Flourish. It wasn't doing too well in the raid, but not disastrously badly and in need of that much help. Definitely for one of the hero talents, while Stalker, it would be, but I wouldn't be too worried about the Keeper of the Grove state of Resto Druid. As for Holy Paladin and Disc, well, we have talked about the state of Disc already. It's less about, it's less about Disc being terrible itself. It's just that it's miserable to try to play Disc on the PTR. It's, getting used to the ramping, right? Getting used to the ramping of Discipline without knowing too much about the fight, with lag, with latency, without a working weak auras and even boss mods. It's just harder. So this shouldn't be valued almost anything when it comes to the value of Disc, especially because, as we said, the tier set of Disc is OP. And the tier set of Holy Priest, as we've seen, is just nice for Oracle for the free cast of Prayer of Mending, but this becomes even stronger for Disc because it makes your ramp super strong. Now we can see here if this Disc Priest got one right. This seems like a pretty good ramp overall. We can see the cast here. When he goes into his final thing, you can see what happens here. He does his Solace into Clairvoyance. Now he has a bunch of resets of Penance. Here he casted only 5. He had 1 more to cast, but he stopped. But that's what this allows you to do when you have your tier set. You already have your Premonition of Insight inside of your big ramp, so you already have 3 full resets of your Penance. On top of your 3 full resets, this tier set now gives you 2 more stacks of Premonition of Insight, which means now you have 5 resets of your Penance. So you can cast upwards of 6, a machine gun of 6 Penances during a single ramp, which is huge. And the reason why this is so low is not because Priest is terrible, it's because it's just much harder to play Disc in the raid, in the PTR right now. That's the main reason why. So if this was the copium about Disc being low, what's the copium about Holy Paladin being low? Holy Paladin right now as well isn't having too great of a time. Holy Paladin in Nerobar Palace also wasn't having that great of a time. It was perhaps the first time we have seen Holy Paladins being legitimately benched from the raid. We have been used so long to seeing Holy Paladins in the raid because Devotion Aura plus Aura Mastery, free spot in the raid for a decade. And then, starting this expansion, it was the first time in Nerobar Palace when guilds, even top-level guilds, actually started to just bench Holy Paladins for multiple fights, like Brute Twister, Kaiveza, even Silken Court. Paladins were just sitting in the bench for those fights. So the first point worth mentioning is that right now, Lightsmith, as we mentioned when we checked the tier sets, is garbage and unplayable. You're only really playing around Herald of the Sun. And we have already explained what is the thing we don't like about this. The thing we don't like about this is that, okay, sure, Dawnlight's healing is increased by 30%, which is, always good to buff Dawnlight because it's a big chunk of your total healing. What we had a problem with was that you gain Solar Wrath after Avenging Wrath fades, causing your Sun's Avatar effect to linger for an additional 10 seconds. And then Solar Wrath increases the effectiveness of your Holy Spenders by 15% and also gives you 2 free Dawnlights. What we didn't like about this is that this happens after Avenging Wrath ends. So after your burst, after your window of healing, sure, Holy Paladin doesn't exactly have huge bursts. We're not exactly talking about a Disc Priest, but even then, after your wings is over, you gain 10 more seconds of a buff. It just doesn't feel too good because you kind of want to have that during your burst, not spread after. So it's not too great of a feeling. It's not even like the mage tier set we talked about, Sun Fury, which gave you a bunch of buffs after your cooldown ends, after, for example, your combustion ends. But for them, you have an entire talent in some Fury, which gives you hyperthermia at the end of your combustion, which means that once your burst ends, you can extend your burst by like 12 seconds. So giving you a buff after your burst ends makes sense. However, in your case, for Holy Paladin, once your wing ends, you don't have much else. So extending this Solar Rat buff after wing doesn't feel too nice. Now, it's not that the tier set itself is at fault for Holy Paladin having weaker results entirely, right? It's a slightly weaker tier set. It's not disastrously bad. This has nothing to do with the performance of Holy Paladin right now. Holy Paladin right now is just underperforming, period. Doesn't have to do with the tier set being too weak and that's the reason why they are here. If the tier set was more OP, they should have been here. No, it's just doing slightly bad right now. That's it. It's nothing to do with the tier set and more to do with balance tuning coming next week, in a couple of weeks, in a month, saying all healing increase by 6%, for example, or some tweaking to some of their talents, for example. That is what is more required for Holy Paladin when being this low. What is not required for another spec being this low is Disc, which doesn't really need help in healing. It's here for different reasons. As for the other specs, they are all doing okay. Even the difference between the top ones and the ones towards the middle, not Holy Priest, the ones toward not Preservation either, the ones towards the middle, yes, these two, it's fine compared to the top three. The top three were doing fine in the PTR. We will see in a couple of weeks when we get the mythic testing, the mythic raid testing in the PTR, that will give us even better results compared to what we are tested in heroic for now. But these have been the results so far when it comes to heroic testing in the PTR and healing results. So for today, this is what we have looked over in terms of PTR results for specs. We can now leave each other on this bird chirping, heat waving afternoon by starting to thank everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who's been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, well, you know, I was hoping for a bit lower than this temperature, 36 right now. Like 32, 33 is like my comfort max.